Welcome everyone to this bonus NASS episode. In this, like we have been doing for the last few weeks, we are going to be covering Shudder's show Horror's Greatest. Almost sounds like I say Horror's Greatest, but no, I am saying Horror's Greatest. That Latino accent uh,
Uh,
going on. But we're going to be covering episode 5 based around space horror. Also, the finale of the series is the last episode, so we'll touch a little bit on our thoughts of the entire series as a whole by the end of it. So, with that being said, I will be your host for this episode, Jose.
I am your other guy, George.
I am your ladyship, Marie.
And
All
you got to elongate the name, Marie, like we did.
right.
Elongate it.
All right, just like Celine Dion would.
It'll go on and on. No, the way I said it, I'm good. I'm good.
Well, thank you for joining us for this episode. Before we get into some of the details of the episode itself, I want to ask you guys something. What makes space horror good, in your opinion? Let's start with you, Marie.
Well, to me, it's like true horror. We know space is out there. We don't know how far it can reach. It's infinite. That idea in itself is horrifying. The psychological aspect behind space is just terrifying. Um, it's just this infinite vastness, the darkness, the unknown is scary enough. You're so alone when you're up there, even when you're in if you're in a spaceship or spacecraft, it's so sterile and barren and isolated and claustrophobic. And I mean, when you're in space, like there's some basic functions, bodily functions that are gone. You can't breathe out in there naturally. You can't walk. You can't stay put. It's just everything about it to me is horrifying. The distance from everything you know is so vast, and like the time is different, and it's just the unknown, and it's real, and it's out there, and it's true psychological. I can't even think about space sometimes because I'm just like I can't compute. Like we can't compute in our minds like what's all out there. So it's a terrifying thing. Yeah.
Kind of feel like Marie just like hit off the checklist right there of
Knocked off
everything.
all the
Sorry.
adjectives. Knocked off all the
I just
adjectives.
I'm
I
like
just
listening.
take
It's like
it
Jose
all.
should have said, "What's one thing? What's?"
Her ladyship was speaking, and I spoke
Yeah,
for all of you. I spoke for all my people, so you don't need to even say I
Yeah.
concur.
So you concur? Concur.
How about this, George? Since Marie fully answered the other question, uh, I'll rephrase a little bit for you. Do you, because there's different type of space horror. For you, what's better in your opinion? Planetary space horror or ship-based space horror? What for you
Hmm.
is more entertaining?
Okay, like that, I would say ship-based space horror. Nothing against planet-based. I do like the planet stuff. I just feel more often than not, the planet stuff will always still feel earthly to some extent because we're filming here, obviously, and sometimes the imagination doesn't fully capture what something otherworldly could feel like. It's always going to be a derivative of what we have here and what we know already. While like on the spaceship, we're always thinking of something new. There's always some other new way to interpret how we would be going out into space and how we could survive in that atmosphere. So I think with that, spaceship location is always better. Plus, there's that sense of like no help. I feel like when you're
Yeah.
on a planet, there's always that feeling of like there's a chance I might get out of this. I might survive because there's a whole planet. But when there's a spaceship, it's like you're practically in a box with nowhere to go. And that box is not forever. It has a finite amount of time where like you're gonna be done.
My response for both is ditto. Uh, it's no, it is true. Like I think it's the environment when you get with space horror, it elevates horror because it can be in the danger on its own, regardless whatever threat it is that you're facing. The environment when it comes to space horror is its own separate threat that you have to account for. I personally prefer on the ship also for that reason because now it's even more restricting. The parameters that you're adding when you put it onto a ship makes a huge difference. Just Like, are your chances better against a grizzly bear in the wild, or if it's locked with you in a room? Like, you can have a better chance if it's in the wild, and that's kind of how I feel about space horror. And you kind of touched on that, George. Is like you can only go so far. You can't blast out of the ship because of all the reasons that Marie mentioned. You can't breathe. You might implode. Whatever it is, you'll freeze to death. So it definitely adds those other elements than a lot of the other horror genres that you might base, on Earth. In this episode, they discuss so many elements when it comes to space horror. Out of all the elements that they talk about in this episode, what's one element that you feel is most terrifying to you?
I'm gonna go mostly with like the psychology, like how your mind can just go crazy out in space because of the nothingness. Not so much the aliens, not the fact that there's nothing out there, just like that sense of being locked in space with nowhere to go. And like over time, that's just gonna just tear you apart. Kind of like when you, granted, Event Horizon is kind of like
Like I know the
this. Granted, there's a reason why they're going mad, but it still plays with that idea, just the idea of madness in space and just being out there and just losing it. I feel like that's probably the coolest element of outer space and horror.
Before we go to Marie, I'm going to piggyback just because I had the same thing. I think psychosis
Yeah, yeah.
is the most terrifying element for me when it comes to it because it's an internal threat. It's not external, so you can't run from it. You can't escape your own mind. If you have a creature on the ship or on the planet, you can try to run, you can try to, you know, spit it out of the ship. There's all these things you stuff. You can't escape your own mind. Even going to sleep, you can't escape your own mind. So I feel like that makes that the most terrifying. But then besides that being that internal threat, the psychosis that comes with the isolation and the darkness and the separation of being in space can also then make you a threat to others, as we saw in Event Horizon, where especially if the psychosis is being suffered by a person in power, someone who's trusted by the rest of the crew to make the decision making that has everyone's lives on their hands, now that becomes an even bigger threat. We've seen in movies like Alien sometimes where people they start, losing their bearings a little bit and the decision making, kind of goes out the window and they put everyone else in danger. So, I'm on board with you on that one. I think the psychosis for me is the most terrifying.
Yeah, the exact same. Especially when you have movies in space that are on a ship because of the isolation. I mean, when you do have movies on a planet, I always find like same as you guys where it's there's places to hide on a planet. If there's aliens and monsters, you can hide. There's places to hide. When you're in a ship and trapped in there, the monsters essentially all around you. You can't hide. You're in your hiding spot, and if you get out, like that's it. It's kind of like, how do I word this? Oh, see, I don't watch too, I actually I can't say that. But I find it really difficult to watch movies that take place on a ship in space because first of all, it's just like so barren and bleak looking, like all the metallics and there's no color in the white. I can't, I don't like that. It makes me uncomfortable, just the aesthetic of it. But the thought of it is like any one wrong move and you are going to perish. Like you're on the verge of like perishing at any point in time. And then all around you is like physical embodiment of purgatory. Like you're stuck. There's nothing you can do. And that just, ugh, like it just, yeah, that whole like the whole psychological isolation and the nothingness of space. And like you say, if you're with other people too, everyone breaks if they don't have communication with like the world or some sort of freedom. Like people will mentally break, and I just feel like you're just waiting for that. You're always waiting for something to go wrong if you're like trapped, even if you're with other people like in space. Like you're always just like there's one wrong move and that's it.
That's true.
Ugh,
And
I'm
then
sweating. I'm sweating thinking about it.
It's too much.
It is.
as you guys may be aware, a lot of people, the talks of visiting Mars have been around for a very long time. probably close to like 10 years, maybe even longer, like trying to work towards it. They actually hired a bunch of IO psychologists. For those who don't know, it's industrial organizational psychologists, psychologists that work within businesses, organizations, things like that, rather than doing, therapy and things like that. They work more in that window. So they actually hired IO psychologists to kind of help starting to figure out how to build the perfect team for a mission like this that will be able to best handle the isolation, the workload. So now technology has gotten to the point that if you go to satellite or you go to the moon, they actually will have their astronauts and things that are out there have sometimes daily therapy sessions to kind of keep them in check, so they have that communication with Earth. But in this trip to Mars, it might sometimes take weeks between communication, so you can't have that. So you have a higher level of isolation. So they have these IO psychologists building like what team, like you can't have too much of this personality, you can't have too little of this personality with this personality. So basically keep everyone sane as much as possible, keep everyone from eliminating each other, getting frustrated with each other or themselves, while still being able to run their mission efficiently and be able to uh, pay attention to the details they need to for such a dangerous mission. That's how much of a threat. They're not even thinking about like, what if we run into like aliens? I'm sure they have. What if we run into
No.
aliens? What if there's tech? It's like main issue is like, how can we keep everyone's minds functioning for this trip?
I would not make the cut, and I'm cool with that.
Now, they went through a lot of movies in there. They went like over 15 like plus movies that they actually talked about, not even
No.
getting into the list that they like mentioned in there. Uh, was there any movies that they discussed that you were like, I need to add this to my list and I need to see it?
Okay, you know what? I have never ever seen, and I obviously know of this movie. I've never seen 2001: Space Odyssey, not ever. And I am
Oh.
ashamed of myself. And actually, during that segment, I like fast forwarded it, like, because my husband's seen it, and I was like, maybe let's not watch this part because I want to watch it. Um, so that is the first thing, even though I know it exists, but yeah, I won't say anymore. I'll just say that because I know someone else is gonna say the one that I probably other one that I have. So I'll take everything like I always do.
Ooh,
Oh
ooh.
God.
What about you, George? I know you've seen the Odyssey. Is there something
Yeah.
that, or have you seen everything that they talked about?
I saw a large quantity as per usual. It's the foreign ones that actually had kind of got me, even though the two that I picked surprised me. One was Galaxy of Terror, and it had Robert Englund in it. And it's like, I freaking love Robert Englund. How do I not know about this sci-fi space horror film, which looks cheesy as hell? Full on 80s romp. I'm all for. And then Solaris, like I've seen like the remake with George Clooney, and it didn't leave like a lasting impact. But seeing that the original ones looked way more interesting to me. And now I want to read the book. It's like this whole thing sounds really cool. It sounds way cooler here than it did in the American version, as it usually works out.
It's funny you mentioned with Solaris. I was just like, because I saw the other one, and honestly, as they're talking about it, I'm like, there was another Solaris?
I thought the same thing. I'm like, this isn't the Solaris that I've heard of. So yeah.
Yeah. So that one made my list. Just because, kind of like you, it was okay. The Solaris, the reboot with Clooney, but I actually never went back to it after the first time. Never had
Same.
the desire. But this one really like caught my intrigue, so I want to check it out. And then the other one, and I'm probably pronouncing it correct, was Aniara.
Hmm. That was
Yeah.
on
But
mine.
Aniara,
Hmm.
and that one again also it seems to be getting into the psychological, the psychosis aspect of
Hmm.
space and the way these people are starting to like question like the universe and life and what that's doing to them like mentally. And I'm like, that's like kind of right up my alley. So that's the other one that I had to add to my list to check out. Through all the ones they talked about, they did talk show some there, especially some of the older ones that can be a little cheesy because let's admit it, space horror in general, it can be cheesy depending on how it's done. So, with that being said, do you guys have a space horror guilty pleasure that you tend to go back to? Might not be a great movie, but it sure as hell was entertaining to you.
They showcased it in the episode, and that was Jason X. Honestly, like I
Oh,
freaking it's not one of the best Jasons. It really isn't. But goddamn is it fun. It is honestly a full-on good time. Because I feel like of the Jasons, like taking out, let's say, Jason versus Freddy and stuff like that, I feel like it's self-aware. It's like we know why we're doing this. This is just to keep the license alive, and we got to make another movie, but so we don't lose it. So throw it into space. He's gone everywhere else, and having the whole like cyber organic mech style Jason. Yeah. Like it's like that comic book fan in me is just like, yeah, that's what you would do. You'd put like some adamantium on him and
mm,
then throw him at some kids.
you're right. That's very comic book.
Yeah.
Very. Yeah.
Mine was the exact same one. And I've talked about Jason X in this podcast before. It is, I think, when we did the Friday 13th episode, I had that one higher on the list when we ranked the movies just on pure entertainment factor. And to this day, to me, has one of the best deaths in the entire series. So it's definitely like in there in top three, like kills. So that one was for me. What about Marie? And Marie, is it or is it not Leprechaun in Space?
You know what? I almost threw that on there. It's no, no, let me say I have two. One of them I'm not guilty at all about it, and people in the world can try to make me feel guilty about it, and I never will because I stand by it, and that's Alien Resurrection. And I
Yeah.
absolutely people can hate on that movie, and that's I adore Alien Resurrection with all my heart. Anyway, that one, and also, you know what? Doom.
I
Yeah.
will
I
give you
thought
Doom.
about Doom. I thought
Yes.
about Doom for a second.
Okay, that do I haven't seen it in a long time in its entirety, but I remember when I first watched it and it goes into that first person and he looks in the mirror and it's first person. I think I cried a little bit because I played that game when I was growing up. That was part of my childhood. I would have nightmares about that game, even though I wasn't afraid of it. I would dream about it, and that part in that movie, I was like, hell yeah, this is great. And I even think it's like a perfectly fine video game adaptation too. And yeah, Doom and Alien Resurrection.
That scene, the POV scene in Doom, still lives rent free in my head.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, whenever I'm scrolling through movies and that pops up, that scene goes right into my head and I start replaying it in my head.
I mean, it lives rent free in my head too, and I'm just letting it squat there forever. It just has squatting rights. Like it can just stay there no matter what. I'm not kicking it out. It can stay.
Well, I do have another question. It's going to be a little tough one, might be a little controversial here. I'm going to ask you to make a tough decision, you guys, because
Hmm.
they brought them both up in this episode,
A lot.
and this is
Hmm.
yeah. Wi- and you know what? I can see why. It's
Hmm.
two of the best in within this genre. So, with that being said, with this being also a big hot debate topic over the years, now is the time for you to declare it. Alien or aliens? What's better to you? Marie?
Alien Resurrection. So
She's like,
Resurrection.
forget both of those movies that you just said. I'm skipping to part four.
Okay. So the thing with this is, I think they perfectly summed it up in the episode where they say that Alien is a better horror film and Aliens might be a better film altogether. And also this is hard too because like, are we talking about a better movie or a better horror movie? Because I think that Alien aesthetically and suspense and all that is a better horror movie, but to me, Aliens is more horrific because it has the child aspect in it and their motherly protection. And to me, that is so horrific and adds such a emotional horror to it. So,
Which one
dude,
is better to you?
yeah.
If they were like,
Okay,
you have to eliminate one off the face of the earth and
Yes.
only keep one, which one are you keeping?
aliens plural.
Really? What about you, George?
Oh, Alien. It's not even a question. It's not a battle. There's no argument here whatsoever. Alien is the better movie. Like, I don't care whether you're talking about horror, whatever. It is the better film. Because I just think it's pacing, it's setting, the acting, the effects. The effects were freaking top notch. And nothing against Aliens. I think Aliens is also a wonderful action sci-fi flick. But because I feel like it's so locked into the genre of action, it's hard for me to put it as above other things necessarily. Like, I feel like Alien is just a good film. Like, you can put that in an awards kind of situation and you wouldn't even
Mm,
question it because it's just the dramatic aspect of it. Like, you feel the terror, you feel like you're in another place, not that you don't get those things from Aliens, but there are times where you feel like you're on a set with Aliens. And
mhm.
that's not a bad thing, but it's there. I felt fully transported with Alien. I feel terrified with Alien, as opposed to like the multiple aliens that are in part two. You figured the army would bring more terror, but it doesn't for me. I think talk about the isolation and everything and the unknown with part one. That's all there. With part two, they know what they're kind of getting themselves into. That some of the mystery is gone now. It's just a matter of like, all right, how many are there going to be? It's because of that sense of readiness, it takes away that terror for me personally.
It looks like I am the tiebreaker here.
Yeah.
And I have to go with Aliens on
Oh
this one.
shit!
Nah, I knew you would. It seems right.
Aliens on that. I mean, you both bring up good points, and George, you bring up good points on the other one. I mean, I love both films. They're 1A and 1A for me. But if I had to choose one, it's going to go with Aliens because I feel it gives you more than one element. It balances things well. Yes, it is more action, but it also does gives you horror. It is able to give you that sense of dread. What I am opposite with you, George, is I feel, you said like with Army like coming in and kind of being ready and knowing what to expect, it kind of takes away a lot of the horror for you. But for me, I think that kind of helped elevate it because, in the first one, you do have that unexpected. So you've got that horror element of that. They don't know what's coming. They don't know what this is. But for them to go in, be fully armed, fully charged, have the knowledge, and still not stand a chance. And I think that makes the alien even scarier because now there's no element of surprise. They're coming in with flamethrowers, guns, bombs. They know who they are, they know where they are, and they're still getting destroyed. And I think that elevated the threat that Alien is and made them even more of a predator, no pun intended, to the predator. Uh, so I think that helped elevate that one for me. So like I have to go Aliens.
I know what George is saying about how Alien is like you could put that for like up for awards, and it's like that's like a better film in that way. Like I totally can, and you do have more of that seclusion, like I'm in space, and that like what we were just talking about, the psychological space psychology that is the horror. And then, but I think Aliens is a lot more of like Ripley's story and like her struggle, and also Aliens made me cry. Like it made me more emotional, and then Alien does. Like Aliens like "Ugh," like stressful, intense, like ooh, but I think that Aliens is more layered, even though yes, it's more cheesy and like, but it's just more of a layered film, and it showcases Ripley's strength a lot more, and also her vulnerability, and I think it made her character a lot more rich and deep, and that's why I think Aliens, I would just go with Aliens because I for all those reasons, even though I can totally see the artistic value more so in Alien. I mean, we can go on with this, you guys, because this is like
Yeah,
they're
I
both
know
so
it's
good in
tough.
their own right, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
admittedly, it is tough. Like
Yeah.
I came in so hard because I feel like someone had to,
You're right though. You're right.
and
Everything you say is correct.
but the reality is I love aliens. Like both,
Yeah,
like
like
I
that's
said, both are great movies.
the thing.
Just to be clear, it's like everything that both sides have said, and also it's like Aliens is freaking terrific. All right, it's
Yeah.
definitely a go-to. I'm also someone who fights that there are 4 Alien movies. We got Alien, Aliens, Alien 3. I still give it credit for what it is, and
Mhm.
Resurrection. Everything after that can go freaking suck an egg. All right, but those 4
Thank
I am
you.
so good with. That's to me a great quadrology. Awesome watch. But if I
Yeah.
have to like choose things, it's like, well, then I only want to watch half of it. 1 and 2 I can be happy with. And then if Jose's gonna come at me with a gun over here and say I gotta choose one again, it was like, well, then I'm only gonna go with one because one gave me everything I needed. Yeah, sometimes I'm okay with having just the full-on dread, and I don't need the popcorn flick aspect of it,
Mhm.
despite how much depth part two, like to give Cameron his laurels, because I could shit on Cameron all day. This is peak Cameron still. This is him still giving great story with great action. That this
Mhm.
this is something that we haven't seen him do in a long time, and this is what made us fall in love with him, was movies like Aliens, and then obviously like T2 and everything. So like
Mhm.
there's great stuff here, but
It,
I'm sorry, it's like I like Alien more. I like
Yeah,
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 it's
rightfully so.
yeah.
yeah, it's made to make a make a choice like be between both of them. But you know, every year, um, I never watch these movies in isolation. Again, no pun intended. Um,
uh
every time I see Alien, I see Aliens. Within 24 hours, I'm
yeah.
watching like Aliens after. I never watch them separate or together. That's every year. Then every once in a while, like every 10 years or so, I might sprinkle in the sequels like to it just to kind of go through them again. But it's 1 and 2 that I watch all the time, nonstop. One that might hit the rotation a little bit more is going to be the new one for me personally. That's going to hit it at the rotation more than every like 10 years like I have the other ones.
You know what, Jose? In all fairness, I gotta redact something I said earlier. There are 5 Alien movies. Good point. There are now 5 Alien movies. I don't know how I forgot that, but yes, Alien Romulus can get put in there. Marie's shaking her head and saying maybe no. Yes, there is a good like 10 to 20% of that movie that belongs in the garbage, but there's a good 80% that's freaking juicy as hell, and you just want to take a bite out of it. Those space scenes, oh, chef's kiss. Oh my
I
God,
mean,
they're so freaking good.
cinematography was, yeah,
Yeah,
cinematography was top
yeah.
notch. There's like
And the
50%, 60% of that movie where I'm like, ah, and then I'm like, oh
and
no.
there's a good droid in there. There's a really good droid. you
Yes.
know
Yeah.
Ignore
Yes.
Bishop, or Rook, or whatever we want to call him. Ignore him. All right, screw that shit. But that fucking black dude, I don't know his name, crushed it. That guy was great. I want to see more of him. So yes, good
Yes.
job, Jose.
Yeah, I think I'm more in George's percentage. I would give it an 80-20, and then it's too hard to ignore that 80 for me.
That's so good.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay,
Hmm.
all right.
Believe,
We
yeah.
got yeah, we got that tough one like out of the way. You know, was there again, they covered a lot of the big ones. They covered Space Odyssey, they covered Aliens, they even the cheesy one that we talked about, like Jason X, they had Event Horizon. They even covered some new ones like Life, which
Yeah.
I was surprised. I didn't think they would include it in there. I like Life. Is it an amazing movie? No, but it has some really good stuff in there, including the scene that they showed in there that I think is probably one of the most vicious like deaths I've seen in one of these movies. The first time
Mhm.
I saw it, I was like, "Oh no, not to Deadpool." Um, but was there any movies that by the time you finish watching this episode, you're like, they could have included this one. I feel like this one was good enough or offers enough to be included in there.
I had Apollo 18, which I was surprised didn't even get shown whatsoever. And I kind of felt like Moon with Sam Rockwell could deserve to be in there a bit. I know it's not a full-on horror, but like it's a really good movie that could fit within this kind of genre. And I feel like if they're gonna mention movies like Wuthering Heights and other episodes, then they can mention this movie. Like this,
If Sunshine can fit, Moon can fit.
yeah. Come on. Like that, I thought this is perfect for this episode, but it's not even a clip. That was disappointing.
You mean Apollo 18, like that, like kind of like found footage
The
movie?
found footage.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hey, yeah, that
You're
one.
welcome.
Thank you. And I just watched one the other, like last week, called Europa Report, which I never heard of, which
Oh,
they,
yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
Shiloh
they
Copley's
call,
in it, I think,
maybe,
from
I
from
don't
District
know.
19 or District 9, I mean.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know, know the actor's name, but I just watched it for the first time. It's like
Yeah.
mockumentary type stuff. And I was like, this is pretty good. It's kind of slow and it's more like tension than horror, really. But I thought that was really well done. Um, and this whole time, or this space episode, I'm like, oh, I know what I'm gonna say. I can't believe no one's seen. And then I thought about it this morning. I'm like, oh, actually, that movie didn't take place in space. It just has to do with an alien. So I can't. But anyway, that movie's called Sputnik. I was going to talk about
Oh,
Okay.
Sputnik. Yeah.
2020
That
Russian
Russian one,
movie.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. But I'm like, oh wait, it doesn't take place in space, so technically it doesn't fit. Um, but I just want to say one thing here quickly. I just want to give a shout out to one of the best space things I've ever seen in my life. I know Jose has seen it, but in VHS Beyond.
Yeah.
Yes, we all seen this. Yes.
Okay, good. The last segment in VHS Beyond, directed by Kate Siegel. The Stowaway, is it called?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is one of the best space horror things I've ever seen ever. And I'm like, you skip all of VHS Beyond. Don't watch the movie. Just watch the last bit that was directed by Kate Siegel, the Stowaway one. And I that had me like shook and I think crying. Like I loved it. And the
That
true horror, like horrific. Look,
that was like a time release one too. So it was like as soon as it played, it was like, oh, that was awesome. But then like the more I thought about it, the more terrifying it got. And I just kept thinking of,
oof.
oh, and this. Oh, and this. And the situation just got so much worse in my head. And I'm like, that's
Yeah.
well done. If like I can still be like increasing the terror in my head just by thinking of new elements, you did your job.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. I actually was thinking about that movie recently because I just saw The Substance. And
Mm.
anyone who if you
Mm.
have seen the ending of The Substance, it made me think of that segment in VHS because it's very similar. The body horror aspect. I immediately thought, I was like, man, I wonder if they saw that movie. Like, because it just made me think of like how grotesque it was. And both those scenes really kind of like get under your skin of like, oh man, I don't want to be like that. Yeah.
Goose honk laugh. I don't know if that picked up. I honked it.
That's yeah. That whole thing at the end of that, that's like what Kid Stop Cooties did to you.
They do. They do.
For me, there was one, and I don't know if I missed it because I was still like, how do you not mention this at all? So maybe I missed it. But Pandorum,
No, you didn't miss it. They didn't show it.
okay, all
Yeah,
right. I
yeah.
was just like,
I
I
wrote it
was
down on my list.
questioning. I was questioning myself because I was like, this. I feel like they would have mentioned it. That I just miss it. So yeah, Pandorum, I feel perfectly fits within this genre. You know, you kind of compare that up with Event Horizon, kind of being around like that realm. And then another one that Predators with an S at the end.
Yes. Yeah.
You
Mm.
know, this that takes place in another planet. It's space horror. I feel Marie's shaking her head. So so the Predator is actually very underrated. It's with Adrian
Mm.
Brody.
Yep.
Yeah,
Directed by Robert
it's good.
Rodriguez.
Yeah, that takes place in another planet. They get actually taken
Oh
to the other planet.
yeah.
So that should count as space horror and them being hunted, and you've got all the creatures and the different types of predators. So like I feel you spend so much time on the xenomorph, you know, you should like do a little bit on his main competition, the predator, and that was your perfect chance to throw that in there.
Thought that was on a different planet. Yes.
Yeah.
So overall, a lot of good things, a lot of good things in this episode. I feel another strong episode for this season. Overall, I feel the season has been strong. With like only really one episode that I wasn't a fan of in there. So, what was you guys' overall thought on this season, and what was your top episode and what was your bottom episode?
I like this season. I think the first season was stronger for me. There were times in this season where I was like, feels a little disjointed, or some of the things they're throwing in the episodes don't classify with what the topic is. Like it just is a little bit like why like we've talked about this numerous times where we're like, why are you throwing that movie in here? Why are you throwing that? Like, there's tons of other horror that you could have. So I found like maybe the writing or the choices for the movies were a little more sloppy than the first season. Um, but I still love it and still want a billion other seasons. But anyway, my favorite episode, I think it's Hidden Gems, I think. But like the scores one was close, just because music is life. And then yeah, least favorite episode is definitely the Killer Days one.
Mm.
Yeah.
What are you, George? What's your overall thoughts and your top and bottom?
Oh man, there's no tops and bottoms here. No. Honestly, verbatim, practically what Marie said for the most part. I honestly felt like both seasons were kind of equal, though, to some extent, because there were some low parts for me in the first season. I think I just appreciated what the show was doing in general, uh, just a little bit more, maybe because it was just fresh, and this is now the second season, and they have something to prove to me at this point, and maybe they didn't prove it as much. Uh, but yeah, Hidden Gems is the one. I also noticed that my favorite episode of the season one was the same number episode in season two, which is episode three. So episode three of season one was the Japanese horror, and I felt like that was the best episode of that season, just because what we all talk about, we want to see something new. Show me something I haven't seen before, and I feel like that's where this show it really shines, is when it's giving us something new. I feel like it kind of loses itself when it's in the too familiar, and like a good example is
Mhm.
that Killer Dates, which was probably one of the weaker episodes, because that
Yeah.
should have been stronger. There were so many good examples that we popped out without even thinking about it, that they didn't even tread upon, and we kind of even did it right now with the space episode. There's just little things that are like crumbs that are being left on the floor. It's just like, come on, how are you guys missing this stuff? It's low hanging fruit. Come on, guys. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm kind of 100% with you, right?
Might be recency bias because it is the most recent I've seen, but I kind of put this one a little bit above the other one. From what I recall in the first season, I feel there was a couple episodes that I really wasn't a fan of. While this one, there was one episode that I wasn't a fan of, and I kind of enjoyed the other ones. So for that, like I think I put this one slightly above it. My top one will probably be the film score one. With that one, besides talking about the film score, I liked how they were able to get like very technical with things. It was very informative, too, with some of these episodes that can be very opinion based and kind of like what they like, what they don't like, and things like that. But this one, on top of giving you that, it was also getting again into the technical aspects of what some of these scores are and how they're presented and everything like that. I'm always a fan when you're able to give me new information that I don't know before. Besides new movies or new artists and stuff like that, new information, new fun facts that I can like keep with me. And that episode was able to do that. So that was my favorite. And then, going for the clean sweep, the worst one is the Killer Dates. And not only that, for me, I think that's the worst out of the entire series so far, not just this season. That one just felt disjointed. Like George said, there was a lot of crumbs left on the table in there. Certain times they weren't even on the same table; they were, snacking on someone else's table. In there, there's just it just easily skippable on that one. There
Yeah.
really wasn't too much redeeming with it. I'm glad that they got it out of the way early on in the season, and then we
Yeah.
were able to finish strong. So yeah, that's raw. But I think overall, another strong season. So I think that's two seasons that the show has entertained us, given us some good content. It hasn't found 100% niche yet of it, but it's going strong. So I am
Mhm.
hoping that we do continue on for a third season. Is there anything that you guys specifically want to see for the new season. It can be new things that you want to see, or it can be, kind of continuations of some of the stuff that you have seen.
I got a bunch of things, but just to
Mm.
spread out the love here amongst all of us, I'll focus on one. And what I want is for them to focus on a production studio. Because
Mm.
we got a good handful of production studios that do primarily focus on horror. So like that could be any studio. Obviously, I think our team would want it to be A24 because that's probably the creme de la creme of horror at this point in time. But it could be Blumhouse, it could be Full Moon, it could be, I think even Fangoria makes movies now, I want to say, or Dread Central. I think they've gotten into the film thing at this point in time. But there are production studios that focus just on that they can kind of lean into, and I think that'd be kind of cool just to showcase a full filmography from a studio.
That's good. And they kind of gave a sampler of that in the hidden, I believe it was the Hidden Gems episode. Those are one of them where they focused for a little bit of that segment on a specific studio and talking about all the horror that they were putting out during like their heyday. But
Yeah.
that was just like a teaser, it was just one little segment. So that would be good to expand on that.
I think that hidden gems should be a staple in every season. I would like a hidden gems episode. I think what they should do is make it 6 seasons and have the sixth episode always hidden gems. I think that'd be awesome. Um, I also want to see more episodes based on horror by country, like like I mean, there's so much that we'd be introduced to, and also so many options. So they can have many seasons and have, okay, we're gonna do this. They can even do, no, let's keep it going. They'll do like one country per season. Um, I also want to see them, which I feel like they did do in this season, was cut down on the spoilers, or at least give spoiler alerts like they did in that one episode. So they're a little better this season. And I just want to see that going forward. And there's a whole bunch of like categories that I want to see too, but
So that what I want to see is I want them to continue to dive into, um, more of the, maybe fun stories, fun facts, little like behind the scenes, like industry aspects, a little bit more into the technical stuff too. I feel usually it's like 99% like personal opinion, which is great. I definitely want to hear the personal opinion of all these people that are in that world and involved in this. But then I also want to hear, a little more objective things, give, especially for viewers who might love horror, but they might not be in tune with the aspects that goes into making a horror and the technical aspects. It would be good to also kind of give that information because that can also improve their viewing experience when they're watching them. They're like, oh, I bet maybe they used this, maybe they did that. Oh, I recognize this and that horror song. Like I think that would be good. A possible topic that I would like them to do a kind of whole episode on this, just because for me personally, I feel it's the type of horror that makes me the most uneasy because one that I can easily see happening and people falling into it, over like a giant monster attacking the city or something like that would be cult horror. We see the true life stories all over the place in there. So sometimes that can make some of those movies very unnerving, overall. And they've touched on a few movies here and there, like they touched on like Rosemary's Baby, one of the big ones. It kind of revolves around that. I would love if they maybe did an episode covering the change of horror between like the decades. So like, from like 80s
mm,
horror, what changed going into 90s horror, what changed going to 2000 horror, kind of showing that growth, that adaptation when it comes to horror. That might be a two-part episode. I don't know, but I feel like that would be really good for horror fans to kind of just see how horror changes from decade to decade.
I actually kind of had something similar to what you just said of like the changing of horror through the decades, and that was like focusing on dramatic horror or just like how horror can be more artistic per se, or taken more seriously. And I feel like there's something there. I think that I actually put that as like my dramatic horror slash A24 thing because they would cover that for the most part. But there are other studios that have done it well too, and with it in over time. And like I think of classic Universal horror movie monsters; those are dramatic horror movie monsters. They are more serious and more. They're not that cheesy when you think of what they're doing. Same thing even with some of the Hammer horror, but then when we get to the 80s, it's not as serious anymore. It's really goofy. Same thing with kind of the 90s. I feel like we're hitting back to that renaissance again of where horror is becoming serious again. So that could be a cool focus. Uh, I put Alien Invasion because I thought of Alien Invasions a lot while watching this last episode. And there was a lot of movies I thought of. I was like, how come they didn't mention this? It's like, oh yeah, it was on Earth. But what about that was on Earth? you know,
Like
and it's
Sputnik.
Yes,
yeah,
Sonic, yeah.
but it doesn't take away from that space. Like there's still that space aspect to it. You think of a movie like Independence Day. It's not horror, but we
Uh,
see parts in space. Even part two, really, we see a lot more space aspect into it. So I feel like Invasion that could be good, and then just focusing on possession, exorcism stuff, because you can have a
Yeah.
whole episode on that kind of thing.
You can have a lot, yeah. That'd be good. Oh, Independence Day is horror in my book. Like that's a horrific. I love it, but it's scary.
William Marie, you have any other categories?
Yeah, cult topic was on my list too because that's one of my favorite horror subgenres as well. Um, they did that whole Stephen King episode, and I think it'd be interesting to have horror books turned to movie to film. Um, that'd be good for reasons where it's like, oh, I want to see that movie now, but it's like, oh, I want to read that book now, actually. That I would like to see a cosmic horror episode, which is not space horror, but cosmic horror. I think would be uh a good topic. Also, I would like to see a cryptid slash folklore episode. There's lots of episodes so I want to see. Like they can do like best twists, but don't give anything away. Revenge flicks, revenge horror. Yeah, these are all things that really cosmic horror, the books one, encrypted folklore, and cult. I think keep my fingers crossed. And different countries. Like I really want to see those badly. So listen to us, Shudder.
I almost feel like HP Lovecraft can cover like all the topics you just said.
Pretty much. Yeah, pretty much.
With horror, a lot of times, people who are not horror fans, they kind of look at horror as this little like small thing, like on the side type stuff. But like there's so much to horror. There's so many elements. There's so many different types. Not just genres themselves, but ways of presenting like horror from super serious to super cheesy and everything like in between. Things that make you look at the shadows at night, or things or horrors that make you look at people very suspiciously. Like there's so much that can come with horror that you can literally keep this show going and cover so many topics season after season after season, which hopefully they do as long as they keep up this quality and they keep entertaining us, people like us, to keep like watching these. So as we start closing out, now that we've seen the last episode of season 2 and we eagerly await season 3, you guys have any final words on Horror's Greatest?
Keep it coming. It's like a never
Keep being
ending, it's
great.
like space. Yeah. It's like space. It's like a never ending vast it's like thing we can explore is horror movies. Like there's so many subgenres and now they're like picking out movies that aren't even horror to throw it in there. So I think we can have this show for eternity. I hope they just keep coming out with more and more
Yeah.
and more. Please. Also
Maybe that's
bring
an
back a hun
episode.
yeah.
We need an episode of so they can feel good. It's just an episode dedicated on movies that are not horror, but feel like they could be or should be horror.
Yeah, let
Yeah.
them get it out of their system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In that episode.
And other
Oh.
system movies.
Well, that has been our coverage of episode 5 of season 2 of Horror's Greatest. We also gave our overall thoughts on this season as a whole. Again, we are eagerly awaiting season 3, and when that comes along, we'll probably be doing this again for that one. If you did not see our other episodes on this season, covering episode 1 through 4, just make sure you tune in to our channel on YouTube at Not a Strong Start. You can also find us on Spotify, on Apple, any of those sources, you can find us on there. You can also find us on all social media, Instagram, X/Twitter, Threads. Pretty soon you can even find us on Blue Sky. Again, at Not a Strong Start. Make sure if you like this episode, you hit that like button, comment down below on your thoughts on this episode. Any movies that you feel should have been touched on? And do you prefer Alien or Aliens? Which one would you choose if, someone's holding you hostage at that point and make you make a decision? With that being said, I have been your host for this episode, Jose.
I have been your other guy, George.
And I'm the girl who steals everyone's answers. Right?
Once again, thank you for joining us. Until next time.